All right. So when we left off last time, we had been talking about testing in Rails. Did you have any questions about anything we had done so far? I guess basically where we were was we had kind of taken a look through our test directory. We'd seen that under that test directory, Rails supplies us with a group of what are called fixtures, which is basically data to use during our tests. We have functional tests, which are the tests for our controllers. Integration tests, which test everything. Performance tests, which obviously test performance. And unit tests, which we use for testing models specifically. I don't think our models had any custom methods added to them. Our tracks, our albums are both basically pretty stock, nothing too special going on in either one of those. There is the possibility that if we wanted to, we could go in and add some tests to our models. Some of the things we might test would be things like making sure that we actually do have the ability to attach an album cover to an album. That was something we sort of added to our model. We could also test that our validations are working correctly. Right? We could test the relationships between albums and tracks. But for the most part, since all of those things are coming from other libraries or coming from other gems, generally those things are well tested in the gems themselves. So I usually trust that if I use them, they're going to work the way that they're supposed to. So I don't usually go back and write my own tests for those types of things. In a model, I usually only add tests if I've actually added my own custom methods to that model. So really, I think the only test that we have to actually work our way through for the rest of this music program, the rest of this music app, is our functional tests, basically the tests of the things that we've done in our controllers. That's what we had been working on last time, and where we had left it. If I go out to the command prompt and run rake, which runs all our tests, it looks like we have about 6 passing tests and about 7 errors. Right? So a little more than half of our tests are still failing. If I actually scroll through and look at a lot of our tests, I see that there's an error in the should create track test. Right? So that's the create action of the track controller. I see an error in there for the test called should destroy track, so the destroy action in the track controller. I see an error for should get edit, so retrieving the edit page, the edit action of the track controller. Chances are all of these errors that we're getting, I think there's about 7 of them, which would make sense, are all errors coming from our tracks controller. And the reason we're probably getting all those errors is our tracks controller got worked over fairly heavily when we nested all of our track routes below the album routes. You might remember back in the tracks controller we went back and added a before filter so it would always load an album before it executed any of the individual actions in the tracks controller. Okay. And then pretty much every action in the tracks controller itself ended up getting modified one way or another, where we restricted the number of tracks that we retrieved to only those that belonged to a particular album, that we built new tracks based on what album was currently being viewed, all of those sorts of things. Right? Now none of that was automatically put into our tracks controller test for us by the scaffold generator. So if we want these tests to pass, if we want a fully testing pass test suite here, we need to go back and do some work on the track tests so that we can get all these things up and actually running. Right? Some of them, most of them actually shouldn't be too terribly difficult to fix. When I look at the errors that are coming up, right, what most of them are in here are routing errors. Right? Errors in here having to do with routes that we're telling it to expect that are not actually showing up. Right? With just about any of these, let's start off, let me find the error for the index page. I bet that's in here somewhere. There it is. When I ran my tests, it shows an error in the test should get index. The actual error itself is a routing error. It tells me no route matches controller tracks. Right? And that's probably true because we can't just go to tracks. Instead, we always had to go through album in order to be able to get to tracks. Right? So when we do should get index here, something that the index is going to need is it's always going to need to have an album object made available to it, or the route to it is always going to need to include the ID of a particular album. Right? If we're going to work our way through that, then we're going to need to make sure that our fixtures, our test data, is well laid out. For example, our album data that was put in for us and modified by us slightly, and our tracks data, which we actually haven't touched at all. Right? When I'm going to have to deal with multiple objects and tests that are related to one another, the way I usually set it up is I will usually go through and manually assign IDs to things that need them. So I might go in and manually give my two albums of test data actual IDs, ID 1 and ID 2. And then over in my actual track data, where it assumes that there's going to be an album, I instead tell it that this belongs to one particular album ID. Right? I actually manually assign an album ID to it. There's supposed to be other ways of being able to do this, but I've never had a lot of luck getting any of these other supposedly getting any of these better techniques to actually ever work. So this is the way I usually do it. It tends to be pretty reliable, if not maybe always the most convenient thing. So what I did was I gave both of my albums an ID. First album had an ID of 1, second album had an ID of 2. Right? Then I went in and I created edited my tracks data. The two tracks that it had already put in there, I set both of them to have an album ID of 1, so both of them technically belong to the first album. And then I went ahead and added a third track, just in case I wanted it, that belongs to album 2. Right? So hopefully that'll do for my actual test data. Right? For the actual tests themselves, it's already set us up with a setup method, which retrieves one particular track ready to be used down in the test if we need it. In addition to that, we're also always going to need an album. So what if I put in add album equals albums 1, or even better, what if I went to the track that's already been retrieved and retrieved its album specifically? So I'll always have that album instance variable available as well. Right? Then down here for my index test, when I actually try to get index, in addition to the index, I would also need to be able to provide the album ID as well. For some reason, something about that doesn't sound right to me. I haven't done this in a bit. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Wonder what it is. Yeah, what if I try just putting in a comma there and I say album is at album? Wonder if that'll make any difference. Do I need to specify a whole different route there, I wonder? I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Let me go back over and try running my tests again. See if that made any difference. Nope, still getting my same 7 errors. The error for the index action, is it still the same? Find it, there it is, routing error, no route matches. Well, it does have album 1 in there now. Controller tracks. Let's see, let's try doing that a little bit different. Instead of doing get index, what if I were to do get album tracks path, and I tried passing the album? Let me give that a shot and run those tests again and see if that does anything. Still 7 errors. Same thing. Yeah, looks like it's still the same thing. No route matches, tracks, action, albums, 1, tracks. What is it I'm forgetting to do here? No, really, I need to know.
Are we trying to pull the page where it shows all the tracks listed?
Yeah, kind of the show page for an album where all the tracks are actually listed. I don't know. Let me go pull up an old project. Let me go find something else that has nested routes in it where I've done testing. Let me pull up the code from my own website.
It says the route for the index is albums, album ID, tracks.
Right, and that's what it said it was trying to access, but didn't it? Albums, the ID, and then tracks. Or it says that's the action, actually.
That's the route for it. The route's album tracks.
Strange. Let me go see how I've handled this in the past. I'm going to go look at the functional tests for another project. Let me find something here. Looks like what I've done in the past is basically still done just a regular get index, but then instead of supplying it just as album, in this case course, I actually gave it as course ID, specifically passed the ID. Let me try that format and see if that helps any.
Seems like an interesting code.
Yeah, good old test data. Try something like that. Ah, now it's dropped to 6 errors. It was kind of a matter of getting that set up in the right format. Is index even listed in here anymore, or is index passing now? I don't even see index being listed as a problem, so I think that basically fixed it. So we're now trying to get index the correct way. Okay. We're getting a success response. That assertion is passing. And we see that, yes, indeed, there are tracks that are being actually assigned, a tracks instance variable that's being created. Okay. That same basic trick, then, should also work with new. So in my new test, I just need to make sure I give it an album ID. For show track, I'll need to do essentially the same thing.
For show.
Yeah, just added in that same little bit, album ID. Let me try putting that in for edit. So I added that same little snippet of code, assigning the album ID to the edit test, the show test, the new test, and the index test. Let's see if that maybe knocked out a handful of those errors. Down to 4 now. Okay. Of the errors that are left, the first one it looks like I have left is with create. Right? That makes sense. I haven't touched the create action yet, so let me go take a look at it. Right? The create action, we're doing an assert difference with a post request occurring. Right? That one's going to need the album ID. So in that post request, I'm going to drop in the ID of the album right there. If I rerun the test, still have 4 errors. Right? Under the create test, instead of getting a routing error, it's now telling me I have an undefined method track path. So that's coming from the assert redirect to right here, which makes sense, right? Because that particular path doesn't actually exist. There's no named route called track. Instead, it's embedded under album. So I'll change that to album track path, and I'll pass the album and the track that was assigned. Let me rerun the tests again. Hopefully we're down to 3. Yes, we are. So I think create is okay now. Next one I'm having trouble with then is destroy. We have a routing error there, so it's probably that same difference. Right? So down here in destroy, I'll make sure that an album ID is provided. Okay, this bit here, just like before. Run my tests again. Should still be 3, I'm willing to bet. Under destroy now, though, the problem is now the tracks path down here. Tracks path method. Right? I'm going to change that to album tracks path. Pass the album to it. Just about anywhere in the tests here for tracks that we're going to track or tracks path is going to have to be changed to album track or tracks path. Rerun the tests again. Very good. Now we're down to 2. Both of them, nope, not both of them. I was going to say both of them are routing errors, but only one of them actually is. Update there has a routing error still in it. Let me go see that one. Here we go. Let me give it the album ID. And on the assert redirect to, I'm going to change that to album track path.
Tracks or just track?
Just track. After we update a track, we redirect basically to its show page. So it's just track. At album. There we go, down to 1 error. Let's see, this last error on the edit page, undefined method track path. That's interesting. Notice that this one's actually an action view template error. That's actually coming from one of our views. It looks like we're probably making it through the controller action correctly, but when it actually tries to render our HTML view, it's in that view trying to use the track path method, which doesn't work. That's something I'm surprised we didn't notice when we were actually playing with it in the browser. If I go take a look at an album and tell it I want to edit a track, sure enough, there's the error. So that was something that I missed when we were actually working over this thing in the browser, which is one of those good things about tests, right? Even though I forgot to go look at that page manually, the tests cover it automatically. Right? So for this one, what I need to do is I actually need to go back to my views. I need to go to my tracks edit view. And there's the offender right there. Tracks path doesn't exist. Needs to be album tracks path. And of course it has to be past the album so it can get its ID for the route. If I rerun my tests now, still got a problem in there somewhere. Oh, the one right above it, the show right there, that one's a problem too. I'm going to turn that one into an array and pass both the album and the track. Which would be the same as album track path, passing it both the album and the track. This is just a lot shorter to type. That's it. All my tests pass.
Can you go back to the update real quick?
The update test?
Yeah.
Sure.
Routing error
Where is it?
on it.
There it is. Routing error is probably, did you get this little piece here added? That's what you need. It's good now? Okay, fantastic. So now we've got a nice set of passing tests, which is a good feeling, right? I hate getting there. It's always a pain getting there. But once I actually have it, it's nice to have. I just then always have trouble remembering to try and keep up with it. My first inclination is always to go straight to the code and start working on new features instead of writing tests for them first. But I try and get better about that. Right? Overall, the testing is pretty easy to do, just running the rate command. Most of the framework for all of it's provided for us. It's just a matter of us going in and getting the right assertions in place that we're actually testing something useful and making sure that the silly things actually pass. Okay? One other thing I thought I might point out is that the testing output here is not what you might call beautiful. Okay? Not exactly the most lovely output in the world. What I've done in a lot of different projects recently is over in my gem file, I've been including a different gem called the turn gem. See if this works in this little project. Okay. Since I've updated my gem file, I need to go back to the command prompt and run bundle. Let's see, did it install turn?
Second from the bottom.
Second from the bottom, so it's already there. Good, okay. With turn installed, when you run your tests, everything blew up. Did it? Mine failed. I'm actually getting an error in the turn gem itself. Turn module, config, undefined method. That's peculiar. Not working. Let's see. Let me try. I ran bundle. It showed it was already there. What else could be the problem? Yeah, it's just going to be one of those days for me today. What else could it be? Oh well, yours worked? So you saw the different output that turn provides? A lot nicer looking, a lot easier to follow, I think. So I'm trying to figure out why it's not working for me. Interesting. I think turn has a requirement on mini-test. Is mini-test installed?
On the album test, did you get rid of the should show album test on it? Because I messed something up and got behind trying to keep up with the yesterday and just left it.
Right. Yeah, on album, I got rid of the test for the show page because we deleted that action, that template. It just doesn't even exist anymore. I don't see that I have mini-test installed. And I do believe that's a requirement. Turn gem. rubygems.org. Yeah, mini-test is a requirement, and I don't have that installed. That could very well be part of the problem. Let me go back over to my gem file, and let me put in gem, it's just all one word, mini-test. Do you know if you have mini-test installed?
Mine works, I'm guessing.
Okay. Did you see it in the list when you did a bundle?
No, I don't see it at all.
Huh.
But it could be a dependency or a dependency of another one.
Something that's just being put in automatically?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. But it would still be listed there. Still not working for me. Oh well. I'll have to go Google around and see what it is that I'm missing there. Why that won't work for me at the moment. But anyway, thought I'd point it out. It does provide an interesting, different sort of output for your tests that in a lot of cases I find a bit easier to follow. Smaller projects with a modest number of tests, I like that turn gem a lot. But when I have a really big project with a huge number of tests, a lot of times I end up just going back to this default output with the dots because when you have a huge number of tests, it does end up being a lot more manageable than the pages and pages and pages of beautiful output that turn would end up giving you.
I wish it would not necessarily get rid of, but hide the gens output of the errors.
Yeah.
And just leave the ones with not a gen.
Yeah, that might be kind of nice. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, there we go. Little rough and tumble introduction to how we do testing in Rails. Overall, like I think I said last time, test-driven development is still a pretty good idea. Write your tests first, and then write the code to actually satisfy them. So what I was thinking we might do is maybe start a new example, start a new little project. I was thinking about a to-do list. It's a fairly simple little thing. And see if we couldn't go through and maybe test first, do our TDD exercise the way we should. Okay. So let me jump out of this directory that I'm in. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to say Rails new to-do example. There we go. New project fired up. Let me shut this old project down. Open this new one up in TextMate. There we go. Okay. So we're ready to roll with that. Okay. So let's see. If we're going to make a to-do application, where do we start? We've got our projects. Do we start testing first? I don't know. It always feels like sort of a chicken and egg type thing at the beginning, because until we've actually generated a model, generated a controller, done some of those sorts of things, there's no testing framework in place. Right? So do we start by writing the testing framework, basically creating our testing files by hand so that we can see those tests fail, and then go and actually create the model and the controller? Yeah, technically I guess that's probably the way we should go. But if we go ahead and create a model or create a controller, then it'll go ahead and write the testing files immediately for us. And it kind of seems to me at that point that that's the logical place to kind of start the testing, right? So do we want to use the scaffold generator or not? Scaffold generator is certainly nice. A lot of times using it or not is going to be the difference between whether you write the code from nothing to get to where you want to be, or whether you maybe start with more code than you really need and have to cut it back to only what needs to be there.
I like doing it from scratch. I don't like scaffold very much.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's fine then. Let's just do that from scratch. I think that's a good way to go. Well, let's start by just generating our model then. I'm thinking just one model in this thing. We just need to be able to keep track of to-dos. So I'm going to do Rails G model to-do. And let's say that every to-do is going to have a description. And I'm just going to have description be a string. Let's also say that every to-do is going to have a complete attribute. Let's make that one Boolean. It's either complete or it's not. Let's say that every to-do is going to have an urgent Boolean value. It's either urgent or it's not. And we'll say that every to-do has a due date, which will make a date time. Is that it? Seems like pretty much everything we might need for a to-do item. Okay, let me go ahead and generate that model. When I generated the model, you notice in the output there that it also created the test file for it and the fixture file for it. So that's all filled in for me automatically. So that's good. All right. Over in my model itself then, there we go. I'm going to do validates description presence true, so we can't have a blank to-do item. Other than that, everything else is kind of optional as far as I'm concerned. Okay. I think I might add a single custom method. Oh, wait. Testing first. See, I always want to go straight to the code. I'm thinking that I'm almost certainly going to end up needing the ability to be able to ask if a task is overdue or not. So I was thinking about maybe adding an overdue method to the to-do options, to-do items themselves. If I was going to do that, then I should probably have a test first that checks for that. Okay. So let me go to my unit folder under tests, my to-do test file, and let's test if a to-do has an overdue method. Alright. I think the assertion I could use here is I believe there's an assert respond to where we could say overdue, and we need some object to ask if it can respond to overdue, if I'm remembering the method correctly. Okay. Let's see, could we do to-dos 1? Pull a to-do straight out of our fixtures? Let's see if that would work. Go back to the console, run rake. Oh, I haven't done my db migrate yet. Okay. So let me do rake db migrate. Then I'll run rake to run my tests. And it definitely did not like that test. Of course it shouldn't, should it? Okay. Type error, to do is not a symbol. Did I reverse the arguments? So go like that. Ah, there we go. No error, but a failure. That's what I was looking for. I needed to give it the object itself first, so to-dos :1, symbol 1. That's grabbing the to-do item from my fixtures, called 1, loading that object, supplying it there, and then we're asking if it responds to a method called overdue. And I'm getting a failure. So it tells me, where's the output of the test itself? To respond to overdue. It's not very clean English-like, is it? Oh, expected this big to-do item to respond to overdue, I think is basically what it's saying. And it didn't. Okay. Failure is what I was looking for now. So let's see if we add our overdue method. So back in my to-do model, I just added a method called overdue. If I go back and run my tests again, now it passes. Good. All right. Now, responding to the method is, of course, only part of it. Okay. Next thing I want is I want it to actually do something useful with it. Let's say overdue method. Sorry?
How's presence spelled validator? Is it P-R-E-C-E and C?
Oh, presence. P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E. Presence true. Got it? All right. All right, next let me check and see if the overdue method actually works. All right. Let me take a look at my fixtures. What do we have in there? So for object 1, to do item 1, it had a due date that was set probably at the time it was generated. 11/29 on today's date. Instead of having that in there, what if I were to actually get it to put in, say, the time that the test was running? Okay. Or maybe specifically, maybe a day before the time the test was running. Okay. How could we do that? Well, in these fixtures, we can actually use ERB in here. So let me jump out to the console and let's figure out how we could do that. If I just do time.now, that tells me what time it is right now. It's almost the same format. I wonder if it'll work. What if I did time.now dot it's not yesterday, I'm trying to remember the syntax. Ago. 2 days ago. What about time now minus 1 day ago? Ew, it's not exactly what I was expecting. Trying to remember how that syntax for that works to get a time based on now but at a different time. What if I did just do 1 day ago? Oh, look at that. That was yesterday at approximately this time, set to UTC instead of in our current time zone. That's a possibility, though. Let's play with that over in our tests and see if that does anything. For the due date here for object 1, what if I just say 1 day ago? And then in the test, when I'm checking to see if the overdue method works, if I say get todos 1, put it into an instance variable called todo, and then I could assert equal to true when I say is todo overdue. Since the due date for that one I'm hoping will be registered as yesterday, then I would expect when I ask if it's overdue or not for it to come back and tell me true. If I go run my tests, that failed. True was expected but was nil. Okay, that's what I would expect, okay? Because our overdue method right now is just completely blank. So what I could do in the overdue method is I could do something like, say, if, let's see, if self dot due date, I just called it due date one word, didn't I? If it's less than time dot now, that would mean it was in the past. So that would return true. So when we ask if it's overdue, the answer would be true. Try running the tests again. And that seemed to pass. Good. Let me go back over to my fixtures. Let me take object 2 here. And I want to set its due date to, let's say, tomorrow. I'm trying to remember the syntax for that. Back over to the console again. Is it 1 day from today? No. Or is it from now? I don't think it's forward. From now. Looks like what it is. That's tomorrow. 1 day from now. Okay. So in my test then, if I say now make to-do equal to that second object, and I assert equal, I expect to get false back when I now ask if the to-do item is overdue. I would want to see false on that one. Run my tests again. Looks like that one passes. Right? 2 tests, 3 assertions. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got a working overdue method for our to-do objects, it appears. All right. Now, for actually accessing them, I'm certainly going to need a page in the app that would let me see all of my to-do items, right? So if I'm going to need a page, I'm going to need a controller. So let me go back to my command line and let me say generate a new controller. I'm going to say it's for to-dos. And let's create an index action, an edit, I should say an index page and an edit page. For the to-dos, what I was thinking we would do is actually put the form for creating new to-dos on the main page, on the same page as the list. Right? Then the only thing we would need to do, I was thinking when we create a new to-do, is give it the description. I think that's enough. And then we could put other controls in, hyperlinks around the actual list of to-dos where we could do things like mark them as complete, mark them as, we'd also need to be able to specify the due date, wouldn't we? Right? Okay, so the description and the due date, we'd have to be able to specify those 2 things when we make a new one. And then we could just use little hyperlinks to be able to mark them as complete or mark them as urgent, was my idea. So I don't think we need a separate new page, is what that comes down to. So just index and edit. No reason for a show page either. I think we can show all of the details for a to-do item just there on the main page. All right, so let me go ahead and generate that. Index and edit action. All right. Of course, when we did that, that also created some test material for us right here. All right. A test file for our to-dos controller that we just generated. All right. Let's see. Let's go take a look at our test controller then. Our to-dos controller, sorry. Got it. Okay, the actual functional tests for our to-dos controller. Right. Since I asked for an index and an edit page, it went ahead and automatically filled in for me tests for being able to access the index and the edit page. So both of them are showing up as GET requests. Right. Automatically asserting that we have a successful response. I don't have, I'm not even sure where I'm going. If I go ahead and run my tests, I have 2 passing tests from my models, 2 passing tests from my controllers. All right. So let's see, what else do we need in there? On the index action, besides there being simply a response, I would also expect for the index page to provide to its view a list of all of the to-do items. So I would say assert, what was it, assert assigns? To-dos? Assert not nil, I think is a good way to do that probably. If I run that, run those tests, I get a failure there. All right. Nil expected to not be nil. All right. Okay, so over in my actual to-dos controller up in the index action, I'm saying that I expect something called to-dos to be assigned. So if I actually go ahead and assign that, that test now passes. Now we would probably actually want to do something with those to-dos. So over in my to-dos templates, the index.html.erb page, to actually do something with those to-dos, I'll take the list of to-dos, I'll iterate through each one of them. Each individual to-do. I think maybe I'll display them in a table. So for each individual to-do, I'll put it in a table row. And in a cell, I'll put in its description. Let's see how that works. Let me go ahead and start up my server. So if I go to localhost 3000, it takes me to my main Rails welcome page. I'd really like when I just go to the root here for it to instead take me straight to that list of to-dos. So let me go over to my routes file. Set my root route. To to-dos index. Restart my server. Why isn't it taking me there? Set root to to-dos index. What am I forgetting? Let me do rake routes. Root URL is being set to go to to-dos index. But in the browser, when I go to localhost 3000, it's not actually taking me to that page. Browser hiccup? No, other browser does it as well. I'm probably forgetting something, aren't I? Always. Oh good, the construction's starting. I'm already thinking so clearly today.
Don't we need to do the resource?
Not necessarily for this, no. Not for this little part. We shouldn't. route 2, to-dos index. It's listed as a route. Shows the path is just slash going to-dos index. The browser says no way. What if I actually do go to to-dos? Alright, to-dos index. That certainly got me there. If I just go to slash, how peculiar. I restarted my server. Not seeing any interesting errors.
What did you do to the index? To do slash index or hashtag index?
Slash in the browser, in the address bar. Yeah.
I got no route matches.
If you do slash to-dos slash index, no route matches at all?
Yeah, I got no route matches. Get to-dos index. Routing error.
Interesting. You still have these up here?
Oh, that's why.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that one should still be there. Both of those should still be there for the moment. We might replace them with resources here in a bit, but at the moment we don't need it. Let me restart the server again, just to be sure. Because that just isn't making sense. Same thing. Well, I don't know. Wow, I'm just not having any luck today. Okay, well, let me just go there manually, let it swim around in my brain for a bit and see if something doesn't pop up. Later I'll realize why that's not working. Okay. Alright, right now on my main to-dos index page, no actual to-dos are showing up. But I guess that's actually okay because we haven't created any yet, right? Maybe back over on my index page, maybe I'll say if at to-dos dot size, if it's equal to 0, then I'm just going to put in a paragraph that says all done with everything. Yep. My little message to myself when I don't have anything to do. All done with everything. Alright, so where are we then? Do we want to go ahead and create some to-dos just so we can see what's there? Maybe we should go ahead and work on the new form. Right? So on this new page, or on this index page, I want to go ahead and put in the form to let me make new to-dos. Put it up at the top of the list? Maybe I'll put it down below the list. Yeah. Because if I have a big long list of things to do, I don't know that I want to encourage myself to create any more. Alright, so let's do form for at to-do like that. If I put that much in and go and refresh my page, I immediately get an error telling me on line 15 on that form 4 line I have a nil class. Essentially what's happening is this @todo that I put in there, the way we always do with Form 4, doesn't actually exist. And that's a bit of a problem. It needs to have sort of an empty blank to-do item so that it has something to work off of to build the actual form itself. I should probably test for that. Back over in my to-dos controller tests, here we go. I checked to make sure that we had a list of actual to-dos, but I also need to make sure that I have a single empty new to-do to be used for the new form. And if I go and actually run that test, that of course should fail. Spectacularly. Undefined method model name. The same error we were seeing in the browser is happening before it can even check the assertion. Alright. So back over in the actual to-dos controller itself, I'm just going to create a new to-do like that, so that that's available for the new form if it happens to need it. If I run my tests again, still getting an error. But now the error is complaining that there's no such thing as to-dos path. If I take a look in the browser, same basic error that we were seeing when we ran our test. So still complaining about line 15, the line where we're creating our new form. It's no longer complaining that we've got something that's nil there, because now we actually do have an item called @todo. Right? But now the form is assuming that because we have a to-do, there must be a to-dos path, probably wanting to post to it, because it wants to essentially go to a create action. Right? So now we might want to go back over to our routes, and maybe instead of doing all of our little individual routes piecemeal the way we were, maybe we should just do our resources. Which I forgot completely how to spell there for a second. Resources for to-dos. I wish I could blame my non-functioning brain today on the construction noise, but I'm afraid I was like this before they got started, wasn't I? Alright, back over to the command prompt. If I run rake routes now, looks like all my RESTful routes are in place, including the one that it was saying it wanted, which was to-dos path. If I run my tests again, still have a problem there. That's interesting. No route matches. Controller to-dos action edit. Oh, okay, I see. So now it's going over to our edit test, and it's having trouble finding the route that's needed there. What's that about? Our edit test here. No route matches controller to-dos action edit. Is that so? We have an edit action in the controller. We have an edit view, do we not? Ah, I know why. It's because the RESTful route version of the edit requires an ID. Edit to do right here isn't just straight going to the edit page. It's now going to the edit page and making sure an ID is supplied. And in our test, We're not supplying the ID. We're just saying do a GET request, go straight to edit. So we would need to say go to edit and supply an ID. I could say take the ID of Todos 1, for example. Run my tests again. Ah, passing. Everything's back to passing. Take a look at it in the browser. And I'm getting unknown action. The action show could not be found. Okay, now in the browser I need to go back and take the /index off of /todos. It was thinking that was an ID and trying to access it. Is my root route working now? No, it's not. Alright. Well, that's good, because if it was, I wouldn't understand why.
I'm still getting a routing error.
What?
For controllers to use action edit.
Controller to do's action edit. Okay. Made this change?
Yep.
What route does it say it's looking for?
No route matches. It doesn't say. It just says controllers to do's action edit. With the hash rocket.
In your routes file, did you get rid of the two get paths, the two get routes, and just put in the resources instead?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else could it be? Let me just look at that error.
I didn't save it. We're good.
Oh, okay. Got to hit save. That happens. Okay. Looks like we're back on track. We can get back to our to-do page again. Alright, so we were trying to create our new form. Here we are. Alright, so now that the form itself goes in without any trouble, we could go ahead and put in the controls we actually need. Let me do a... trying to think of just physically how I wanted to structure the form. Nothing fancy, I suppose. We could just do... I'm going to do f.text field for description. And then I want to just put in the controls for selecting the due date. That would be f. Is it date time field for due date? Nope. Doesn't like date time field or date underscore time field. Might have to look that one up. Rails date time field. What's the name of it? Oh, here we go. Date time select. I bet that's it. Yeah, that looks about right. Let's do, it was one word, right? Yeah, date time, one word, select, not field. There we go.
Getting an action show cannot be found in controllers. Did we make a show?
In the browser, are you still going to /todos/index? Yeah, get rid of the index.
Just on to-dos?
Yeah, just /todos.
Okay.
When we switched to the RESTful routes, anything that came after /todos was assumed to be an ID at that point. Okay. All right, with those two little bits, I've got my field where I can fill in my description. I've got the ability to select the due date. I need a submit button. f.submit, which says create to do. Can live with that. Not the prettiest form in the world, but good enough. And when I actually fill out the form and I click the Create To Do button, the form is going to want to submit to a create action in our controller. Our controller doesn't currently have a create action, so that's something that we're going to need to add. Which means we're also going to need tests to go along with it. So let me add a new test. Should post to create. It's supposed to be should. Okay. So when I post to create, I want to assert that there's a difference when I do todo.count. By default, that difference it'll look for will be that it goes up by 1. What I actually want it to go through in order to see that there is a difference is I want to send a post request to the create action of this controller. And the create action should receive the information that the form collects, basically. So a new to-do, where it'll be given a description. I'll say, well, what we could do is we could take one of our some of our fixture data. So I could do to-dos 1 dot description and to-dos 1 dot due date. Oh, and that one's going to need to be labeled due date. So as a new to-do, I'm passing it a description and a due date, just like our form is collecting. Hopefully that'll make the number of to-dos go up by 1. Once that's done, then I want to assert that we redirect to. And where I think we should go is back to the index page, since that's kind of our main showing page for all of our to-dos. So when we create a new one, it would be almost like we never left that page. It should just kind of magically appear in our list. It's what I would hope. Alright. If I try and run those tests, they fail. Actually, it says we have an error, right? Action not found. Create action could not be found. Well, yeah, I suppose that's right. Over in my to-dos controller, I haven't even created the create action yet. So let me go ahead and do that. Now how do the tests go? We get a failure. Looks like an error still. Missing template for to-dos create. Alright, now that's actually not a bad thing. In our create action in our to-dos controller, since we didn't tell it specifically what to do as far as redirecting or rendering, it assumed that it was supposed to show a template called create, and one doesn't exist, which is what created that error. So in that case, no big deal. What we actually want to do here is we want to go ahead and create a new to-do using the params that were submitted from the form. We then want to try and save that new to-do. If it saves successfully, then let's redirect back over to the index page. And we could send along a notice saying to-do created. If something's gone wrong with creating the new to-do, then let's just re-render the index page so they can just see the form again. Need a little CSS in there to be able to see the fields that are highlighted if they've done something wrong. Pretty much the only thing they could do wrong was to leave the description blank. That was the only thing that was required. Let me run the test again. Still have an error in there, don't we? Undefined method index URL. For Todos controller, when we run our post to create test, where's that one coming from? Undefined method index URL. Is it in the controller itself?
Mm-hmm. You see, mine says line 13 and 14.
Does it?
The two ends.
Huh. Oh, I think mine's right here. That's not right. That should have been the to-dos path. Let me try running my tests again.
Same error.
Yep, same error. Line 13.
The one that refers to the line that says post test function to do controller line 14 block. So it has something to do with the post of the test.
I don't know, anything's possible, but I wouldn't think so. Index URL, where is it getting index URL from? Redirect to index action. Oh, wait. Index, that should be Todos URL. There we go. Alright, I had colon index right there, which was being translated as being index URL. But I didn't want to go to index URL, I wanted to go to the Todos URL, which is the index page. So that seemed to be what I did wrong right there. I do still have another error though. Undefined method assert redirect to. So assert redirects to, is it? Something like that. I just read it 5 minutes ago and all of a sudden I've forgotten it. Nope, that's not it either.
Should it be Todos URL?
Either way, probably should work. It's the assertion itself I'm forgetting the name of. I'm writing the assertion wrong. Assert redirect to. Huh. Well, let's take a look. Redirected to. There. Hey, all my tests are passing again. That's cool. Does that mean I can actually create to-dos now? I'll make a to-do of finished to-dos example that's due in about 5 minutes. Now look at that, it showed up. Buy milk. Make that one due tomorrow. Enjoy the sun. Set that one for a few days from now. That seems to be doing the trick. Creating to-dos. Good. That's probably a good spot for us to stop today. We've only got 5 minutes left, and everything's working, everything's passing, so that's a nice place to finish it for today. We'll keep working on it more next week. What do we have left to do? We need to be able to mark to-dos as being complete. We need to be able to mark them as being urgent. We need to show the due date. Oh, well, that part's pretty easy, yeah. Let's see. A few different things like that. We've got the edit page still to do. Need to be able to destroy them. Definitely moving along. Were there any last questions? All right. Hope you have a good weekend. Thanks.